What's up, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabral, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope everyone's doing well out there.
If you guys who have never seen the show before, we're just two guys that like to talk over the biggest stories in gaming, but we always like to start with what we've been playing. So, Steve, what you been playing?
Yeah, so I finally started trying to actually complete some games. I know I have that huge habit of continuing to start new things and try out new things. So, first and foremost, I did complete Stray. I knew I was, and I would be surprised if I didn't from last time we recorded. Just under 4 hours I beat it. I liked it. I thought it was a charming game. I do like the mechanics. I didn't realize, and I've never really watched too many of the trailers unless it was on during a state of play that I was watching live. I didn't realize how, and I don't mean this as like a hit against it, just you have to be aware. I didn't realize how almost point and click adventure it is in the style of go here, get this, come back, do this. And there were some cool little gimmicks. There's a part where you have to try to, there's a guy, and I'm not gonna get super into spoiler, but they're loading a store and you have to trick a guy into carrying you in with the box, and that kind of stuff was kind of cute, right? It made sense as a cat doing these small mechanics. But I do wish there was, I guess, almost more platforming in a sense. I do really like actually playing as the cat is really fun. Jumping around and just figuring out how to get up through ACs and cracks in the walls and everything like that. I do like that, and I do like how not super direct it is in the. I consider there's like two open world, and what I'm talking about, two like open world sections of the game. And I do like how it's kind of like lets you free. Some side missions, some characters. You start, at the surface it looks like a very, thin storyline, but there's actually kind of a deep lore into the world of what's happened, and who people are and where certain people have been and everything like that. So it's really interesting actually that I did start diving into some of that stuff, into a little bit of the extra content there. But when it's all said and done, I thought it was a nice, charming game. I did play it through the PlayStation, the new service. Part of me wants to buy it physical because I feel like this is something I want physical for some reason. I don't know if I'm in a rush to play it again. I did look to see if I wanted to platinum it. You have to beat it twice, but I would have, because I didn't do everything the first time. I'd probably have to do it like 3 times, 2 more times. And it's not a game that I think warrants that right now. So maybe down the line I'll get the platinum, but I think it was really charming. I did like it. I thought it was a nice, relaxing thing to do. From when we were recording last week, and I was able to do it in pretty much 2 sittings. I think my game clock was just under 4 hours, so it is a nice little relaxing experience in a sense. Nothing super though there are like a couple sections where you get a little anxious because of some chase scenes. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I think it's a nice little game. I think it's something that everyone should play about right now, especially right now before we get some big hitters coming out soon. Saints Row, God of War, Bayonetta, all these other games coming out soon. I think it's a nice little sort of pause, refresher experience, and then you move on. So I enjoyed it. I went back to, and it's funny enough, we were talking about it before we started recording. I actually went back to my Switch, had to dust that off a little bit, and I finally beat Kirby in the Forgotten Lands.
Me too.
I thought, as soon as I picked it up, I remembered how much I really, really liked that game, man. And I think we talked about it when we were like, I think it was last episode, we were talking about, games that might be our, in our game of the year, or at least really high on our list. And I think I mentioned it. I don't know if I put it on my list or if it was a notable mention, but I knew I did really like it, and I really did like it. I just liked it even more. The finale really builds up. I don't like that. So you beat the game, and then there's some endgame content, but the endgame content is almost story-wise mandatory to do. And I haven't done that yet, just because it's very Kirby endgame content that if you played any Kirby game, where you get some rehashed levels, some remixed boss fights, and it's stuff you've already played with a twist or a small change. And I'm just not in the mood to replay some of that stuff. If it was brand new levels, I probably would have knocked it out that first day, but it's brand new like twist on these levels with a special collectible, and I'm sure it leads to a final boss, another final boss, and another cutscene, and maybe you unlock something else from there. But I'm just not dying for more Kirby. I felt like once I rolled the credits, I think I was set. Then they hit you with that little teaser, which I thought was teasing DLC, not more content. But if you want bang for your buck, let me tell you, this game, between all the extra missions and all those extra challenges with the abilities that you unlock, and now the end game content. I don't know how much end game content there is exactly, but this game will give you bang for your buck and keep you busy. They've been really well with the last couple Kirby games, just keeping the content going. Like, they'll update it with more challenges and things, but also just having so much content there from the get-go. So I'm really, really excited to see that. I was really happy to see that in Kirby. So overall, I'm even more positive about it. It didn't end too off. We'll see how I feel once I do that endgame content eventually. Quickly, I obviously been playing more of Multiversus. It's launched in full beta, but open beta, so it's like released. Same way the Fortnite Battle Royales thing was always in beta for a long time. It's kind of the same thing. The game is out. You can play it free to play. Or you can purchase it just to get all the characters up front. Been playing a lot of it. They've been tweaking a lot of it. Evo was this week, and as we're recording, Evo's pretty much over. It was cool to see a lot of that stuff going on, a lot of updates, and it's interesting. It is at that point where I'm like, it's a worthy competitor to Smash. Again, still not as tight as Smash, and just the controls aren't there, and it has that microtransaction stink all over it, but I don't mind jumping in for an hour or two every couple of days just to do a lot of challenges they have. So if you feel like you're constantly unlocking stuff without having to spend money, which is a huge positive. It's something that you do, especially in Smash Ultimate was awesome. Every time you turn around, you were unlocking a character, stage, something going on. So big shout out to I think I forget the company's names, Players First Games. This is their first big thing, and I'm excited to see a couple more characters come to it. The last thing I've been playing, it's been the demo because the game's not fully released yet. I just want to get the full title of it because I always forget. It's called Victory Heat Rally. I don't know if you've seen this game.
No.
It's being published by Platonic. So the guys who've done like Demon Turf and a bunch of all these other games. They're publishing it, but the developers are Sky Devil Palm. And it's really cool. It's really cool. It's like a retro. It's hard to even describe. It's a retro racer, but it controls like a new game. It's really cool. I think the art style is really cool. If you when you get a chance, definitely look at the art style and the working of it. It plays like a sort of Mario Kart style. You're in a little car. You got a lot of drifts. You got different things. Obviously, the demo's just out. It's a small game. It's like maybe not even 2 gigs. So definitely put it down. You can try it on Steam Deck. I'm not sure if.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask where you're playing it.
Yeah, so it's only on Steam right now. I believe it's only on Steam. So I played it on my physical PC. I haven't done it on Steam Deck. I don't know if it runs there.
Yeah.
But it's really cool. I love the art style, the music. It's so just throwback to that sort of retro style. So it's really cool. I've only played the demo because that's all that's out. But the pixel graphics are gorgeous. The music, it's just really well done. The full game, I don't know when it's going to be released. I don't think they have an exact date yet, but they're promising, 12 characters, 12 cars, 36 stages. It's going to have split-screen multiplayer, arcade, attack, rally mode, mini games, Easter eggs. It looks just really fully well for a sort of an indie retro racer game. But it's just, I'm really excited to play it. I've played the demo multiple times throughout the weekend. I think it's really cool. Everyone check it out. I think it's Sky Devil Palm, is the developer. Victory Heat Rally. Really cool. I think it's really cool. Everyone definitely check it out. There's a free demo. No problem. But that's all I've been playing. What have you been up to?
Sure. So that's funny that we both went back to Kirby. Yeah. On Thursday, I think, or Wednesday, I went back to Kirby because I was like, I kind of want something to play. I don't feel like spending a ton. I'm still in this lull. So I was like, there's 2 games on my back catalog I want to go back to, which is obviously Horizon and Kirby. And I had no clue where I was in the story for either. So I was like, we'll see how long it takes me to get through it. And so I kind of just banged out Kirby in maybe 2 more sittings or something like that and beat it. And for me personally, I think it actually rose in terms of my placement in my top 5 in terms of how much I like it. I think it kind of came together even more at the end there. There's lots more creative ways that they've designed the levels. The boss design is just really impressive on that late game, where there's things that almost at times felt straight out of like an Elden Ring or something like that, like some of the moves of those late game bosses. I'm like, that's pretty insane for a Kirby game, and they really changed some of the visual themes of the late game to the point where it's like it becomes essentially a sci-fi game, which is really, really weird, but like really cool. And yeah, it gets surprisingly deep, and then you start getting some insight into it, and like it goes full, I swear, on the last battle, and I won't go into super details for anybody who hasn't played, but it goes full Final Fantasy, or like the end of Kingdom Hearts. Like it gets really crazy, and I'm like, what the hell am I looking at? But it was amazing. I played it handheld, so I can play on that beautiful OLED screen, and yeah, there's something about that, man. I swear, like that Switch really just holds up so well. Like it's just such a beautifully designed system, and so that was a real treat to be able to go through. And yeah, I also reached some of the late game content or the post game content. It's very strange, yeah, because there's an entire narrative thread that's tied to it. And when the game ends, it leaves in a bit of a point where it's like there's room for what I thought was either going to be DLC or a sequel. And yeah, it's actually tied to that. Now, I don't know if the additional content at the end actually resolves it or just maybe gives you more context. I don't know. And I might chip at it, but the way that is structured, it's not that you're replaying exactly what you did previously, but it's kind of akin to that, and it has these giant sections that you can kind of replay and get more story, and I just don't really want to do that. So I've kind of chipped at that, and I'm in that first section. I'm almost done with that part, and then I'm just gonna see how long that takes, and if that part takes too long and you have to do that multiple times, I don't know if I'm trying to do all that. I think I've gotten what I needed out of this, and I'm not so invested in the narrative of a Kirby game that I need a clean resolution. If anything, I might just look it up or something like that. But for now, I'm actually probably cool on it. I'm probably going to walk away for it for now and go back to my Switch in a few. When Splatoon comes out and Pokemon and all that, I'll probably return at that point. So I think I'm done with Kirby for now. I also went back to Horizon very briefly, kind of chipping at it. I don't think I have a ton more, but it's not something that I binge in long sittings or anything like that. So I'm just going to keep kind of working at it, and ideally, I'd like to have it done before Saints Row comes out. Ideally, because I'd like to focus on that game. So in the meantime, I'll keep chipping at Horizon, finish Kirby, and then also I've been playing a lot of Ghost Recon Wildlands on Game Pass. It's interesting because this is a game I skipped. I don't really play any of these type of games at launch just because I pretty much know what they're doing there, and they're very similar to each other, and it's not something I'm ever going to play like as my main game unless I'm really just trying to kill time or stuff like that. And so this game's interesting for anybody who's played like Breakpoint back in the day. I say back in the day like that's a really old game, like maybe a couple years ago. This is basically akin to all those kind of Ghost Recon, Tom Clancy games, the third-person ones. The only difference is this one's kind of in an open South American environment, so it has a lot of Far Cry tendencies as well. So it's kind of like Far Cry meets Breakpoint, and overall I think it's a pretty solid game. You kind of they lay it out again very similarly to Far Cry. You got these different lieutenants that are in charge of different parts of the map, and you do different things and gather different bits of intel to uncover them, unlock missions, and then eventually take them out. And it's a third-person game, but then when you aim down sights, it turns into first-person when you're shooting. So. And that transition is pretty smooth. Overall, I think it's a pretty solid game. It's not something that I'm in love with, but it's definitely entertaining enough to kind of keep my interest. I don't think I mentioned this last time. I beat Strangers of Paradise, Final Fantasy. And I still don't know. So I totally had fun with it. I'll give it that. I totally had fun. And this is not a spoiler. Anybody, they were very forthcoming in the fact that this immediately loops into Final Fantasy 1. And I think the way that kind of comes full circle is really actually kind of cool towards the end there, where it's like, oh, that's actually really dope. And the funny thing is, that makes me want to play Final Fantasy 1, but then, you go to Final Fantasy 1 and it reminds me immediately why I don't want to play Final Fantasy 1. But, because, it's it's the anti-quality of life type of game. It's a very old kind of just is what it is, old school 80s JRPG that I just don't feel like dealing with right now. But that Stranger's Paradise overall pretty fun, abysmal writing as one could expect, pretty nonsensical story even to the end when they kind of explain what's going on and you finally get insight into why everything is the way it is. I still didn't fully grasp what was going on, and it got kind of to the point where like a cutscene would launch towards the end, and I'm like, all right, and I'd like get up and like heat up a burrito or like take out my phone or something like that. I'd be listening to it, but I wouldn't be paying a ton of attention to it just because by the time I got 15 hours in, I'm just like, if I'm not getting it now, I don't think I'm going to get it. And they're throwing more at you. So from a storytelling perspective, I don't think there's much there. But in terms of just gameplay, I actually found it quite fun. There's lots of different classes you can play. And I like the armor loop, just grinding out different loot and assigning the strongest thing and then breaking down the loot that I'm not using to upgrade my weapons and seeing my team get stronger and stronger. It's interesting the way the team difficulty balance system is, because like they'll give you a projected level of what you should be for a particular mission. So let's say your team level is like 90 and the mission is at level 100, so you're 10 levels below where the suggested level is. You almost don't even need to pay attention to it, because you could just go into the mission, kill a couple enemies, and they're going to drop level 100 gear, equip the gear, and you'll be level 100 in like minutes. So it doesn't really matter how under-leveled your team is, so long as you're able to defeat enemies. And if you could defeat enemies, and even if it's a little grindier because you're a little under-leveled, you'll be leveled up almost immediately. So there's almost no incentive to go and play the side quests, because there's not that much narrative tied to it at all. And the best thing you could do is try to grind out loot, but you don't need to do that because you'll end up with hundreds of pieces of loot almost per mission. Like, there's just so much loot in there. So it's a very interesting way that they've designed it, that it kind of, because of the way they designed it, they made half the game not necessary to play. So from that perspective, that was kind of weird, and maybe they didn't give that a ton of thought. But overall, I would say I enjoyed it. I didn't regret it. I bought it for, I think it was $40 when you sent me the sale, something like that. And for that price, I'm not mad at it. As somebody who now has finally beat it and everything like that, I'm not mad at it. And I think it's a perfect pick up and play game. You pick up, you play, and then because it's so segmented and there's so many save points, you can really stop at any point. And so long as you don't have a super hard investment in the story, which if you do, you're kind of a psycho, then it's a perfect game to kind of play on the side and walk away from whenever, because it's really designed to do that almost. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty positive. It's not coming anywhere near my top 5, but I would say it's definitely a highlight in terms of the games that I had fun with this year. I would give it that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've been playing.
Yeah, it's funny because I haven't beaten it yet. Strangers of Paradise. Mm-hmm. I do have that in like. I have it physically. It's in my PS5 because I do want to sort of. I'm in the same point where it's like it's gotten so just ridiculous that I want this to be over. I just want to beat it. So I am slowly gonna probably chuck through this week, and who knows if I'll beat it by the time we get there. I have some other stuff on the back burner I want to clear out first, but that is something I kind of want to get out of my way. Also, just want to mention, so Ghost Recon Wildlands. That was the first one, right? That the Breakpoint was a sequel to this one, correct?
I remember them coming out very close to each other. So let me verify that, because so Breakpoint is July 26, 2019, and Wildlands is February 3rd, 2017. Yeah, so this one's older than Breakpoint.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure because I thought. This was around the time that I was working at GameStop, so yeah. I recalled the cover, and I recall it got really popular. They had done I don't know if it's still active. But there's like a Predator collaboration mission they had done, and it had gotten really popular then. So that's why when I saw the cover just now and I looked it up, I'm like, this is the first one, and then they did Breakpoint,
which is very similar. But I almost kind of like this one better, but.
Which I think that was the consensus, but I just remember also I remember there being some sort of Predator event, and that was the only experience I had with Wildlands.
Yeah, these are weird games because they're like a Far Cry meets Division. But like when I'm playing it, I'm like, this is entertaining enough as like a Game Pass game and stuff like that. But I don't 100% know what these games are trying to do, to be honest with you, and what they're trying to be, because the tail end, like it's repetitive in a way that you would see in a Ubisoft game, but it's open in a way that you would commonly associate with like these multiplayer, perpetually online EA type games, where they're expected to have these long tails where people play them, almost like a Destiny type game, and I don't really see that many people grinding this out for 100+ hours. There's no way. I mean, it would become unbelievably boring by that point. So these are interesting games. If they do a third one, I'll more than happily play, but it's not one of those things I play at launch. I got Breakpoint for less than $20 because these games have very severe discounts eventually. So these are like the perfect like weight on it, and then when you can get it for a couple bucks, or if you have Game Pass, damn near for free. They're kind of like the perfect games to kind of play in the background and burn time for a night if needed, to mess around in the world with your friends and take out an encampment. From that perspective, I think it's pretty good, but not that impressive technically.
I also recall that I think these games almost immediately died when they announced NFTs coming to it.
Yeah.
This is when they were doing that.
The quartz thing.
Yeah, the quartz. This was, I think, I want to say, I know Breakpoint was. I don't know if they were going as far back as Wildlands.
Yeah, Wildlands was probably super dead by that point.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah, so yeah, for anybody who's like looking for something maybe light to play with a solid multiplayer, it's on Game Pass now, but also Far Cry 5 is on Game Pass, and it's not multiplayer in the same way, but it's way better, so maybe just play that. But so we got our first story, and we're getting some interesting details from GTA 6. And if Jason Schreier is reporting it, there might be some serious credibility to the story. So according to Bloomberg, Rockstar Games has overhauled its workplace culture. Now, for anybody who didn't know, with previous titles, especially like a Red Dead, for example, there's a lot of controversy from ex-developers and people who were working there that it was apparently a really toxic place to work. And so it was a bit of a point of concern with a lot of people who maybe like Rockstar Games but don't want to support that. Apparently, they're trying to make strides to improve that. So apparently there are more producers to help avoid overtime or crunch, as it's known in the game industry. There are schedule changes, conversion of contractors to full-time employees, removal of the abusive employees, new mental health and leave benefits, and staff is more flexible with their time. Now, whether or not this actually leads to real tangible change on a bottom level for the developers is unclear. These are actions that management has taken. I'm sure that they have released a statement to Bloomberg, maybe detailing some of the strides they're making. So you could chalk it up to corporate talk if you like, but they are at least saying that they're attempting to make some big changes over there in Rockstar, which is good to hear as a person who's a fan of Rockstar and who would like to support their games going forward, that at least there's an attempt. Hopefully, the more abusive headlines coming out of Rockstar in the past. So before I get to the second part, do you have any thoughts about this portion and kind of the strides that Rockstar is making to improve conditions over there?
No, I mean, it's all good stuff. I always worry when it's like this stuff is like quote-unquote leaking or being told to the public instead of just employees being able to come out and be like, oh man, they've changed they've changed our flexible with our time and this, that, the third. So as long as they're sticking to, and if this is true, this is not just corporate talk and it's not just them saying something to save face, and it's a thing that they're actually going to work towards and accomplish, I think that's great. I think that's obviously great. I mean, Rockstar, that company's not going anywhere in a sense. So if you are if you get comfortable working there and they were really helping you out on both sides, then you're gonna have a job probably for the rest of your life, or as long as you're in this industry, as long as that's what you want to work on, is these styles of games. So as long as this isn't just talk and stuff that they told to Bloomberg to release, or quote unquote leak, and it's actual merits that they want to stick to, then that's great. I'm really happy for them, especially since we are such big fans of Rockstar.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things. It's not that I don't believe them, but it's one of those things where you kind of have to wait and hear from the people who actually work there, like the actual employees, and we'll see from that perspective. But it's one of those things that maybe some time will need to pass. And the second, probably bigger part of the story is that GTA 6 will apparently feature a playable female protagonist for the first time. She's a Latina that is in a pair of leading characters influenced by Bonnie and Clyde. And so here's some of the details that we're hearing about. Working title is Project Americas. Main location is a fictional version of Miami and its surrounding areas. So obviously that sounds like Vice City. Game will evolve over time, adding new cities, which is really exciting. And the game world is already large, more interior locations than previous GTA games, which is dope. Because I feel like that's probably one of the things that GTA 5 maybe took a little bit of a step back on, was interior locations as compared to maybe even like a San Andreas, for example. But obviously there's way more going on in GTA 5's world. But yeah, this was very exciting news to me. This is in line with a lot of the rumors that I had been hearing previously on Reddit for the past couple of months probably. This is definitely in line with what I've been hearing. It's surprisingly controversial that there's going to be a woman protagonist. I feel like it's long overdue, and I don't think it's a big deal, but maybe that's because I've played as a woman in GTA since 2013 on GTA Online, so it's not a big deal. I didn't realize that, like, I don't know if it's like an issue where like maybe gaming is just so inundated with incels that it sounds like people are more upset than they are, or people are genuinely perturbed by this. I don't know. What are your thoughts about some of the rumors about GTA 6 so far?
I mean, it all sounds great to me, to be honest. I've also I always wondered why, and I understand the story now for GTA 5, why there wasn't a female playable character. I don't know if you want to call him protagonist, but the female playable character. And I understand that the story they were telling in GTA 5, it's a big complex story that it kind of makes sense that there's not a female like playable in their trio. And I always was hoping for at least GTA 6 to finally get there. I don't understand everyone's all up in arms. I don't know. I'm super confused. Why do you think GTA 6, why does GTA have to be a male-only protagonist game, especially when you have competitors doing it for a longer time? I mean, in Saints Row, you've been able to choose your protagonists for I think almost the whole series if you wanted to play him. I know, like, Saints Row 1 and 2 I played as male, and then Saints Row 3 and 4 I played as a female. And sometimes it makes the scenes just better, makes it different. Now, I understand where that was more of a creative character, and this one's going to be scripted character, but that helps. And I think the Bonnie and Clyde sort of feel is actually probably where exactly it needs to be, especially if we are going in a sense back to Vice City, or a recreation of Miami in a sense. I think it's great. I think the evolve over time, I think it all makes sense because one, everyone has admitted that GTA 6 has taken way too long. And I think with the mindset of that, the game, even single player, can grow to other cities, other missions, their events, so you don't only have this online changing, because GTA Online 2 or whatever it's going to be is obviously going to be like this big changing thing constantly. If you can have some that reflect in the main campaign and have people want to go back to the story mode to continue a story on with one of the, with whatever character it is, I think that would be great. I think this is all great. I think this is almost exactly what I kind of want. The only thing I worry is it sounds exactly like what I want in GTA 6. That I'm going to be let down because I know there's no way it's all going to be in there, or at least not correctly. But up front, from the rumors and stuff, I know it'll be a while before we hear more about GTA, at least officially. But I think if this is at least a starting point, I think this is going to be really well. And I know that, again, there's going to be hate on it, but that's almost the minority. I think it'll be really exciting to see GTA in a new light. Yeah,
for sure. And when they say new cities, a lot of people are interpreting that differently. Like, so obviously some people are like, oh, let's say they'll have a fully playable, let's say, Vice City, and then you're able to travel to Liberty City, and then maybe able to travel to Los Santos or something like that, which I think is possible. I also feel like we don't actually need to look to something so theoretical. We could actually just look to their last game, which is Red Dead 2. And if you go to Red Dead Online, we have a massive map with multiple cities, each with their own kind of culture and vibe. And so, I feel like they could do some things very similar where, like, how Los Santos was California. And you have these tiny little towns, I would say, in these little pockets around. But what if they did maybe the Red Dead treatment where, you'll get Vice City, that's obviously in Florida, but then maybe you go across along the coastline and they can have some major cities that maybe feel like a Georgia or like a Atlanta, for example, and stuff like that. So that there are cities that you could probably connect and go to each other, but they're their own identity, some bit of a way apart from each other. I think that would also be pretty cool. And I also kind of think about like a San Andreas, for example, where you have one map, 3 cities, and each of them feel very distinct. You got the LA, you got the San Francisco, and you got the Las Vegas, and each of them feel very different. And so I think that's also a possibility that, it's not that you're flying from these massive pre-existing maps like a Liberty City, because you have to think about like the sheer size and undertaking that would take to just host something like that online wise, to have that kind of it's hard enough to run GTA 5, it's hard enough to run GTA 4 online, and then they're gonna have some GTA 6 with Vice City. Imagine having to run all 3 of those concurrently. It seems a bit much. But if they can have one kind of, the sheer size of what Red Dead was able to do, and that was, again, as much as I love Red Dead Online was always a secondary thing. I don't think it was ever pitched as kind of on par with the main story, and it certainly didn't get the love and treatment and attention that GTA Online got. But so imagine if, they designed a world very similarly, but with these own, like in Red Dead, you have like Saint Bordeaux down there. And so you could be messing around online and it's like, hey, where are you? And it's like, oh, I'm in this town, shooting gators. Oh yeah, I'm all the way up north in there, hunting elks or whatever. Imagine that getting the GTA treatment where, it's like, oh, I'm speedboat racing in Vice City. Where are you at? And I'm like, oh, I'm like up north somewhere, riding an ATV in a swampland or something like that. And it's like, different geographic environments, but all kind of in one map, I think is more likely. And the difference is, maybe it's like bigger and more diverse than Los Santos, because Los Santos was based on California, so there, you get a little bit of the Pacific Northwest vibe. In Sandy Shores, you get the desert thing, and then you got kind of Los Santos, the city down there, with like San Andreas and stuff like that, which has its own identity. With this one, I think the opportunities are actually a little higher to have more environments. Where like they could stretch all the way to Appalachia if they wanted to, and maybe have the Everglades, and they could really play around with it in that region, and how far they want to go out, because they do these kind of like shrunken down versions of the United States, so they could play with it quite a bit. But I'm quite excited about it, and for me the main thing is like GTA Online is cool, but like just having that impactful campaign I think is important. I've recently went back to GTA 5 Online. And got a chance to re-experience that kind of front to back right after I did a replay of 4. And as much, it did really kind of open my eyes to something that a lot of people talk about, but I never really paid much attention to, which is the fact that, there was quite a steep narrative decline in 5 compared to 4. Where like 5, I think, had a lot more quirky things, but is way less compelling of a narrative than 4 is. This whole idea of like this, especially if you throw a Lost and Damned and Ballad of Gaytoni in there, it's not even close. Like, like this kind of immigrant coming to the United States, rising through the ranks, as opposed to these 3 guys just kind of bank robbing. Like, that's kind of the extent of it. And they have the whole storyline about what happened North Yankton all those years ago, and Michael faking his death and stuff like that. But it's just a lot less compelling of a narrative. So I really hope that the campaign can really take center stage again on 6. And as important as GTA Online is, that they don't overlook that. And I think the days of story DLC are dead. So I really hope that they kind of come out of the gate with a very robust, interesting story that can motivate people to play it, because there's an entire generation of people who jumped into GTA who will probably never touch GTA 5's campaign. You got to think, this game came out in 2013. There's kids who grew up on this game who don't really remember never having access to this game, as crazy as that sounds to guys like us. And some of these people have never even touched the campaign. The analytics from Rockstar show that. So I would love for that to be able to take center stage again. But yeah, that's kind of my kind of perspective on it as just a huge GTA fan. I'm quite excited with what I hear. And now I guess the only question for me is just like timeline. What are they even projecting this game to come out? I don't even know.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's something I had a discussion with someone else about.
Okay.
Who he's a little bit more on the positive side. He's thinking maybe even 2024.
24. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I told him. I said we have a bet going on. That's definitely not going to happen. He listens to this, so I know he's going to hear this.
Okay.
There's no way 2024 is going to happen. I would be shocked. In a world that they announced it for 2024, it would be delayed. Because I think Rockstar delayed everything. GTA 5 was delayed. Red Dead Redemption 2 was delayed, I think, twice.
Yeah.
The PC version of GTA 5 was delayed. And if there's just no way. This is no way. So it is more of one of those things where it's like, man, I really wish I could get my hands on this now, because I think there is a style that GTA only does. There is a specific Rockstar feel to it. And I know we're getting Saints Row shortly. We know that's such a different style.
Yeah.
We know there's similarities, and now specifically with this reboot of Saints Row, it's going to be drastically different. But it's going to be interesting to see where the stories and where the gameplay lines up. We've seen some gameplay now of Saints Row that looks a lot more akin to Saints Row 3, which is fine. That way it's very different. Saints Row 3 and 4, well, especially 3, very different from GTA 5. So
oh, yeah.
There's something that only GTA can do, and that's something that we've kind of been missing for a while, even though it seems like GTA 5 is just always being re-released. That experience is the same. So it is sort of a wishful thinking of when will this drop.
Yeah, my just estimation, just having played these games for a while, paid attention to Rockstar for a while, what they've been talking about with it, their actual vocal cycle in terms of acknowledging the existence of it, and that not happening until fairly recently, I would say that we maybe see first official details, like actual hey, it's going to be called GTA 6 and it takes place in this town. I think we get that maybe late next year. I think they formally acknowledge it and show maybe very little off, like in terms of like a splash screen of the actual logo and maybe a confirmation on location and stuff like that at maybe something like a Game Awards 2023. Yeah, 2023. I think they expect the initial date that they might launch will maybe be like Q4 2024, like a year from when they first show it, but I don't think it actually comes out until early 2025. That's my guess. So I do agree with that person that maybe they announced that it's coming out in 2024. I just don't think it actually is going to. I think it's gonna slip into 2025. I don't think it goes too far beyond that, because then you're entering Elder Scrolls territory of like Bethesda over and I don't think Rockstar is that far out from a new game. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's also close either. And yeah, Rockstar is a weird one in terms of keeping things close to the chest versus talking about things. They're kind of weird in that front. But they're definitely ones to know that like if it's close, like I've seen insane people actually throwing around next year, which is just comical to me. Because like if it was next year, you'd know. To me, them just saying like, "Hey, we're not doing," I know they didn't say this, but it kind of got leaked that like, "Hey, we're scrapping the GTA 4 thing to focus on GTA 6." That doesn't sound like people like super late into development. That sounds like, okay, maybe the pre-production is completed, the script has been finalized, and now they're actually actively in development. But even that can take up to 2 to 3 years. I think they have like a 4-year dev cycle sometimes with some of these more demanding games. So I don't think we touch this until 2025 personally. But I'd love to be wrong on that, and I'd hate that for it to go longer than that. I'd be surprised. I don't think it's like 2026 or anything like that, because again, at 2026 we're talking about 13 years after GTA 5. That's a bit much. That sounds kind of crazy.
That is ridiculous. You got to think of
A teenager.
At that point, we may even have a Saints Row 2 reboot. And I'm just using Saints Row as an example because that's one of our anticipated games coming up.
Yeah.
But at that point, you're telling me we got Saints Row and Saints Row 2 reboots before we got GTA 6.
Yeah, and it would be one of those things like if a kid was born after your game came out and entered their teenage years, that it maybe has been a little bit too long. So let's get it out before 13. Right now, we're at 9 years, so it's about to be the 10-year anniversary, I think, next year. So which is insane because I remember walking to GameStop to grab that game. Yeah, so I think 2025 is probably the safest bet, judging. But as we get more information, I think that it's going to become more. We'll have more insight into whether that's a conservative or a liberal estimation in terms of when the time is actually coming.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, so until we get more details, we'll have to unfortunately put a pin in GTA 6. But again, hopefully, who knows? Who knows when we'll hear anything official. Coming up next on the story, we have some more Ubisoft information. As always, Ubisoft's always in the headlines. But according to Kotaku, Ubisoft has multiple Assassin's Creed games in development. Now, you and I are both pretty big Assassin's Creed fans. You a little more to the new ones, me a little bit more to the old ones. But you did just replay all these recently. So
yeah, so I think I'm a little bit more mixed on it now than I used to be.
I feel like you have an appreciation for what each section has done.
Yep.
But they have a couple of Assassin's Creed games in development. So the first one referred to as Project Rift, which is a standalone Valhalla game, which apparently this was that DLC they talked about a while ago that ended up being flipped and moved into its own smaller game. It could be the unannounced smaller premium title that Ubisoft's also discussing. So that'll be interesting because I know Valhalla got a second season pass, I think, or a year or two of all these DLCs that they were supposed to do. So that's going to be pretty interesting to see how that works out. The other title, though, Project Red, is possibly set in Asia, and it will be part of what they announced as Assassin's Creed Infinity, which is supposed to be sort of now umbrella platform for future Assassin's Creed games. Project Red is said to be part of that. We're not positive exactly about Project Rift. That may be its own little smaller title. But Kotaku was unable to confirm whether Project Red takes place in Japan as rumored previously. Now, Japan is obviously one of the biggest requested things. It almost seemed that's where Assassin's Creed 3 was going to go.
Yeah.
If you looked into the lore of Assassin's Creed 2, there's a final movie that... It's not a spoiler, but where Ezio dies, and he does something that's gonna lead off into a Asia Japanese spire. Now, I from my understanding, they did do a very small Vita game on that, but unfortunately, it wasn't the full-fledged game we have.
Oh yeah.
Now, it's a little weird now because we do have pretty much what we could get from Assassin's Creed in Japan in Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
I don't think they would be anything vastly different, but I do have it's like half and half, right? I'm sort of excited because we're seeing Assassin's Creed come back, not exactly every year. I don't think we need it every year, but we do like to have different tastes of Assassin's Creed, especially the way they're going to do this sort of infinity platform where you can pick and choose the experiences you want. It just also makes me worry about quality concerns when we start having full DLCs being moved into full games that are still connected to your previous game, on top of full-fledged games that are supposed to be under this new umbrella. It makes me think back when we were just getting constant Assassin's Creed games before you even had time to finish one. The next one was out, and DLC was being so late. So it's kind of I feel like it's an issue. I didn't mind them maybe speeding up the process and making the games a little bit smaller. I think we saw that in Valhalla, and I know you loved Valhalla. I really liked Valhalla too. It's one of those games I do want to get back to. But it was just so stuffed with content, and you weren't. It's always hard to find out what was main story, what wasn't main story. Whereas other games show it pretty distinct. Valhalla really blended it all together. So, how are you feeling about this? The multiple games in progress.
Yeah, I mean, so I have different thoughts about different parts of it. So the Project Rift thing, I think, is pretty obviously the DLC about Basim. where he was going to go to Baghdad, Iraq, and it was going to be a smaller stealth experience, and that turned into its own thing. So I'm pretty convinced that Project Rift is going to be that because of its attachment to Valhalla. I don't think we're getting any more Eivor stuff. I think the Siege of Paris DLC was the end of that. They did, and then the end of like traditional Valhalla DLC, the Ragnarok DLC thing they're doing right now, which is the only DLC I haven't played, I think is kind of the extent of what they're going to do in that. So for right now, I think Basim is the only holdover from that era that they haven't touched, that they had plans to do but hasn't arose into anything, is the Basim DLC. And anybody who's played Valhalla knows that he is very much akin to the old style of Assassin's Creed, his attachment to the hidden ones, and there's lots of potential there. Once upon a time, I may have been a little bit more concerned about them being like, hey, we're going to scale things back for this one, because, what does that look like in a post-Odyssey and Valhalla world? You know what I mean? But when I played the Siege of Paris DLC and you were actually walking around gathering intel, listening to conversations on the rafters of a church to assassinate somebody, it showed me that, hey, like even in a game like Valhalla that is so far from what it used to be, what Assassin's Creed used to be, they still got it. Like they still got it in them to be able to do that. And kind of going back to the old games, I think there's something I think super exciting about the idea of just a trimmed 15 to 20 hour experience, and less so of a massive map and a map with more engaging things to do in it. Lots of different activities to do within one. You got to think, like some of these old Assassin's Creed games, some of them are actually pretty big. Like Assassin's Creed 1, like there's quite a bit of cities. But then you look at Assassin's Creed 2, where like Italy is huge, but it is you spend a lot of your time in kind of one city. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen, when you go, by the time you get to Valhalla, we're talking about England, France, Norway. I mean, like, and I know there's more, Finland, like there's so many different countries in there with their own different thing that it's just so big, but there's not much in it. And then you go to these old games and, they do so much more with less, in my opinion. And things obviously change after 3. But with those first 2 and they're kind of spent, with the Brotherhoods and the Revelations, I think they kind of mastered what it meant to have a little bit more of a edited experience that gives you a lot more to do in it, and I can appreciate that a lot more. And so I'm really excited about Rift. I don't get the Infinity thing. Like I still don't really feel like I know what their ultimate purpose for that is going to be. Like, I don't know, because I understand these games are a part of this larger, I guess, portal, but for what, I don't know. I don't know what benefit on Ubisoft's side is, and that's just going to take them explaining it, I guess. But, like, what the point of kind of unifying all this is, I don't really know. And yeah, I just get nervous about them kind of going closer, not that we're there yet, but getting closer to annualizing this franchise again. Just because, say what you want about the post-Origins Assassin's Creed games, but in terms of like a sales standpoint, those games kind of saved the franchise in a bit of a nosedive it was taking, post-Unity, especially in those Syndicate years. Things were really drying up. And it's because they were just pumping these things out. And they still produce some really solid games. Like, for the most part, I actually really liked Unity. And I thought Syndicate was a lot of fun. So it's not like these are, like, bad games by any means. But they were pumping them out. And you felt it. And I think things got a lot better when they slowed things down. And Odyssey has its issues. But that gap that Valhalla gave them and has allowed them to kind of breathe after that. And spent some time on DLC. The Wrath of the Druids, the Ireland DLC, I thought was excellent. The Siege of Paris, a lot of fun. Very doom and gloomy, but really fun. Great DLC. I'm not into the otherworldly stuff. So, like, when the Atlantis stuff in Odyssey and then in Valhalla where you're Odin and you're killing... Like, I'm not into any of that stuff personally. So I kind of skip all that. But in terms of like them kind of having multiple projects in development, it's totally fine if Rift is a holdover from Valhalla that's been worked on for a while, turned into its own thing, and then Red is their next big project. That's totally fine. I just want them to be careful about going back to pumping them out again, because we saw what that happened last time. And they kind of almost killed Assassin's Creed. And thankfully they kind of switched things up and actually put it all into these single experiences, and then rolled out the next one when the previous one's cycle naturally finished, instead of hitting these kind of like a Call of Duty format, like, it's November, time for a new Call of Duty. Once upon a time it was like, it's fall, time for a new Assassin's Creed. And it's like, after a while it's like, I'm playing the new Assassin's Creed. Which one's this? Is this the Paris one? Oh, no, this is the London one. Oh, but I thought no, that was the other one. You know what I mean? Like, after a while, it's like, it kind of just all blended together. And so I like that they can have their own identities now and have the time to breathe. I'm still down for them to go to Asia. It's just been so long. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I felt like I was excited about the Asia prospect back when the old cast was still around. Now that all the future stuff are gone, the Isu stuff is still attached to Assassin's Creed, but in a very different manner. And I think it's less integral. Now we have this newer character, Layla, who I don't think anybody but the more hardcore Assassin's Creed fans even know exist, to be honest with you. This is not a Desmond situation at all. Like, it's like, go up to the average person like, hey, did you play Origins, Odyssey, or Valhalla? Yeah, and if they say yes, who is Layla? I bet very few people can answer to who that is. So Assassin's Creed is just in a very different place now, where I just wonder if the Asia stuff will have the impact it would have had back in the day when that's what it was building towards. I wonder. I think they're going to have a little bit of an uphill battle to fight to differentiate it between what Ghost of Tsushima did. Interestingly enough, as popular as Ghost of Tsushima is, this game will likely sell a lot more and be a lot bigger, because this is, Assassin's Creed is a lot more accessible than the Sony first party games. So I think this is going to speak to a wider audience that maybe some of these people maybe never played Ghost of Tsushima. But I think obviously they're going to have to focus on the stealth portion of it and maybe go more into like a Tenchu direction than a Ghost of Tsushima direction. Ghost of Tsushima obviously has that samurai side of it, and I would say, I think it's safe to say they're not even going to touch any of that stuff. I think if anything, it's going to border more on the ninja side, which I think is good. So I think they still can do it. It's just a matter of having that own identity, something akin to maybe the origami games. Imagine a polished origami. No offense to them, but something like a bigger budget origami, I think, is a perfect example of a way to have a trimmed, edited experience with the assassinations, and then I think they just really need to get back to that, Brotherhood versus Templar dynamic. I think the Isu stuff is interesting, but the way they've gone about it is so over the top and unnecessarily complicated that I would say, like, limit it to a little bit of animus stuff, and then just have that kind of age-old conflict. Like, this game is about us taking a look at this war between these two factions throughout human history. I think that's the way they should keep it, and hopefully Rift and Red and Project Red kind of keep in line with that. But that's kind of just my thoughts about it.
No, yeah, I couldn't say it better myself, actually. That was the perfect way to recap it. It does need to, and again, every title they come out, and they always say they want to back to the roots,
yeah.
Story-wise, and that is a big thing. It was almost it was an issue starting, I want to say, Assassin's Creed 4, where you don't play. I don't think he ever actually officially joins the Assassins. From my recall, I think maybe very, very late he does. But
what, in Origins?
No. Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
Oh, Black Flag. Yeah. He technically killed the assassin who was part of it. So
killed the assassin, takes the outfit, and then eventually his goals line up with the assassins, but he actually doesn't become the assassin.
No, his grandchild really does, which is the guy from 3. Yes.
So it's exactly, which is the guy from 3, which was a weird way to want to.
That was a weird era.
It was a word. They were trying to step away, but they kind of wanted to keep it together, and that shows the sort of issues they started having with that, and then they try to fix it with, I think next was Unity, where they would try to super infuse the Brotherhood, but it's always been more of this.
Yeah, there's Rogue
mystery,
in between too.
You know?
Yeah.
Rogue was, that's infamously the one Assassin's Creed game I skipped.
I hated that one. I hated it.
So it is something that there, because the biggest thing in Assassin's Creed has always been Assassins versus the Templars, and the mix and the mix of where they were in history. So when you get just so far away from it, it's like, is this an Assassin's Creed game? You know, if you look at Valhalla, removing a few minor details, and that's just a Viking game, which is not bad. It's not a terrible thing to do, but it's like, I want it to feel like an Assassin's Creed game.
Yep.
From start to finish, and not a game that was just given the Assassin's Creed title. I had very fears. We haven't talked about it. I don't think so, because I don't think either of us are too interested in it. But I had fears that Skull and Bones was going to be rebranded as Assassin's Creed game.
Oh
for
God,
a long time.
I hope not.
From my understanding, it's not. But for a long time, when it went missing, and that game's been in development, for a long time was like, that's going to be slapped with an Assassin's Creed title, and it's just going to be pushed out. But unfortunately, that's not true. So it's really going to be interesting when we finally see one of these projects, or we have to see the way they launch Infinity. What is it? The problem is we don't know what any of this is. And Ubisoft stuff leaks constantly, from people sitting on a bus, leaving files at a bar. Most of these Ubisoft games always leak, just because of carelessness. So it'll be interesting to see what some of the stuff eventually actually ends up being. And I hope it's a bunch of good games. I do hope that the games are good, because that's really what we would want. I don't want Assassin's Creed, a franchise that's so dear to me, to just fall apart.
Yeah, for sure. And I would also like to remind that a lot of people I've seen say online, oh, they just need to go back to their roots, and then all of this is fine. But I think it's also important to remember that not only do I think they should go back to their roots, but there's also maintaining what works about the new ones. What worked about the new ones, I think, is that ability to breathe. The fact that there was robust DLC, and they took their time with it. They didn't crank them out. So I think that is an important thing to remember, because this whole let's go back to our roots campaign thing reminds me so much of, do you remember when Call of Duty had that whole boots on the ground gameplay?
Boots on the ground.
Yeah. And that was a reaction to the whole, Advanced Warfare, Titanfall era. People got burned out with the future thing. And so they're like, we're going back to our roots, back to boots on the ground. And what did they do? They immediately ran it into the ground, because by the time they got to Call of Duty Vanguard, people were World War II'd out, and it's like, that's boots on the ground. That's what people wanted, but they just cranked them out and cranked them out and cranked them out. And you can give people fatigue about anything if you do it enough. And so that's my big thing for it is go back to their roots in a good way, because in many ways going back to their roots would be the way they used to do things, which is these trimmed assassin versus Templar experiences every single year. So let's not go all the way back to our roots. Let's take the good, and then let's take the good from the newer games, which is the fact that Odyssey didn't bump into Valhalla. They had plenty of time to kind of flesh things out and try things out, and expand that world and the lore and the DLC. And what they did ultimately with Odyssey and Valhalla, there's good, there's bad. Like, everybody feels, people feel differently about it. There's things I like. Even me, somebody who I loved, Odyssey was kind of my reintroduction to Assassin's Creed, and I really overall really love that game. But there is a lot of things I don't like about it. It's very empty. It's too much sometimes. And is Cassandra the most engaging character in the world? Not really. And it's weird when she ties into this. She becomes I can't even get into it because it's too spoilers. But for the 5 people who actually are interested in playing Odyssey that haven't already, it does too much. And that's my big thing with it is it's like the gameplay, I would like to change, but I would also like them to trim the scale down a little bit more. And it's like, get back to that conflict and get rid of all this crazy, I'm guarding the gates to Atlantis with this timeless staff that keeps me alive. Do we have to do all that? That was one of my thing. And I like Assassin's Creed, and I've liked it even back in the day, even though I fell off of it. I always kind of had a tangential appreciation for them. Even back in the day, I remember playing, and they had like these golden apple things, and I'm like, what is all this extra stuff that like I liked this is going on in the future, and this is going on in the past, and we're getting information from the past to inform us about the future. I liked that dynamic. So some people who don't like the modern day stuff, I'm not even one of those people, but sometimes where they've always lost me is the Isu tech stuff. That is where things, like, it's a delicate balance between, oh, this is really cool, like this ancient civilization thing that may or may not be aliens, and then this whole, now we have people who are still alive in modern day from ancient Greece. I don't know about all that. You're losing me there. And so that's where I feel like there's an opportunity. I think, honestly, Assassin's Creed probably needs a little bit of a reboot, but not in a hard way where it's like they're retelling Desmond's story, but more so in a soft reboot, a Saints Row, like where like it still happened, but maybe reset the story a little bit, you know, have a new protagonist maybe, and reintroduce the Brotherhood or the Hidden Ones or whatever you want to call them, reintroduce the Templars, the Cult of Cosmos, whatever you want to call them, whatever period of time they're in. Reintroduce all those things, simplify it, trim it down, and then when you do the Isu stuff, I feel like there's maybe a more elegant way to introduce that to make it flow with the rest of it, instead of it feeling like this weird disjointed thing where you had 3 different narratives happening at the same time and none of them quite jived together. And, you know, the people who were playing this were 13, so they didn't look into it too crazy, but then going back into it into your mid-20s, you're like, they were doing a lot here.
Yep.
And so I feel like there's a way to kind of trim that down a little bit that I think will work to its benefit a little bit more. And I think make it a lot more accessible to some people who maybe want to get into the story of Assassin's Creed, but don't want to necessarily inherit, 15 games worth of lore in that process to fully understand what the hell's going on. So, that's just kind of how I feel about it.
No, yeah, I completely agree. That is something that I wish would happen. I thought that's what kind of was happening when they switched to the open world origin style game, but they for so long they like struggled along with the old storyline, and so much of it was integrated into it. Like this is not spoiler. I mean, Assassin's Creed 2 came out forever ago. There's that scene. I don't remember which Assassin's Creed. It was with Ezio, but I don't remember which one it was where Ezio gets one of the devices and he talks to Desmond.
Oh yeah,
and that's
is that Revelations? That might be.
It might be Revelations. I don't recall. I know it was Ezio who did. I just don't know which one of those 3 games that does it. And that's for a second it's wall breaking, but then it's also sort of this mystery that just all ended up kind of going nowhere. They sort of like didn't know how to end Desmond's story, and that's why they just dropped it.
Yeah, they just fumbled it
for so much, and unfortunately it sucked. I always hold them to it that they did a very bad job ending his storyline.
Oh yeah.
But we see where they are now, so it's like a reboot in a sense of you can jump in at this point and go on. I think is really what is necessary for them.
Yeah, and in many ways, I feel like this 1-2 punch between Rift and Red, if they could do Rift in the way that, okay, like this is a good entry point in the way that, like, hey, would you like to see what this used to be like? And maybe it feels better, but like you get that trimmed kind of old school. He's going to be back in the Middle East, so it's going to feel a lot like 1, and I feel like there's lots of opportunities in that regard. Obviously, timeline-wise, this is way, way in the future from when 1 took place. But I think there's that opportunity there. And then on top of that, with Red, if they can kind of reset some of the narrative and the future stuff, because if Rift is the Bossum thing, it's still going to tie into Layla. Not that Layla needs to be trashed per se, but I feel like they need to reintroduce what this franchise is even about, really. Because if you jump into Valhalla, let's say you jump into Valhalla, you've never played any of the previous ones, you will not understand anything about the Templars. It's not a clear thing. There's some kind of secret society pulling the strings behind the scenes, but what their motivations are and who they really are is not apparent. It's apparent to people who play it because we understand where it came from. We played 1, 2, 3. We understand how they're kind of interwoven through society. These newer games haven't done a great job really explaining that, short of maybe a little bit Odyssey with the whole Cult of Cosmos thing. I think they showed the kind of political power of the Templars in a really interesting way. And technically, the Cult of Cosmos is technically the precursors to the Templars. But that's beside the point. Overall, I would say it obviously needs a reset, and I think Ubisoft knows that. I think whatever we see next, I think is going to be. It's certainly not going to throw out the old continuity, but I think for some degree they're trying to find new entry points for people, because in this world of let's make things as easy as possible to jump into, let's keep people player retention, all these analytics that exist for these companies now, I know they have to see the fact that like Assassin's Creed's in a weird spot right now where you got a lot of veteran people. You got people who are pissed that it's so different. You got new fans that like the new stuff and don't want them to go in the old direction. You got a whole bunch of people who don't even know what this franchise is about anymore. They're in a weird place where they can't please everybody. And so I'm really excited to see what Ubisoft's answer to this is. And I feel like if they do like small experience, big experience, small experience, big experience, this is an opportunity to possibly kind of calm everybody. And so for the old school fans who maybe fell off around, Unity or Syndicate, I think they could probably jump into Rift and be like, yes, this is what I wanted all this time. But then the people who want those bigger experiences will be happy with Red and something like that. So yeah, that's just, I think maybe a game plan for them, but it's something that I think we'll see sooner rather than later. These Assassin's Creeds don't have the longest incubation cycles, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw both of these, early next year. We could possibly see Rift as soon as, really late Q4 2022 for all we know. They kind of pop these things out of nowhere. So I would not be surprised, since it's ongoing, to see Rift pretty soon, and then Red maybe sometime next year.
No, yeah, that'd be my guess too.
But yeah, so that's the show for this week. Only two stories, but two big stories, I would say, and kind of two things that we're highly anticipating. We got lots of things in the works. We're starting to transition into the season of all the releases. It's been kind of a lull for quite a while now, but we're about to go into August. We got Saints Row. September, Last of Us is going to be coming out, the remake. I'm excited to jump into that. We have Splatoon, Bayonetta, Final Fantasy will be back with Crisis Core, God of War, Ragnarok. We have tons of things coming on the work, so I think the news cycle is about to pick up like crazy, and our top fives are definitely going to be challenged very soon with some serious competition, so I'm really excited to see that. Sonic, of course, too. Who am I to leave out Sonic? I don't want to disrespect. But yeah, so that was this show this week. This is the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabro, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope you guys enjoyed.
And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye.